You're only 14 years old. Mother's death has shattered your world, and you hope that now the father will hug you, support you. But instead he tells you, pack up your things and learn to live. And then he throws you out of the house in the dark night. What are you doing where you're going? And most of all, when years later fate brings you face to face with the oppressor, will you forgive or take revenge? I was only 14 years old. That's the age when children dream now. Play. Don't think much about the future. Life was like a dream for me. I lived in my own little house, where the scent of a mother's love permeated every corner. Our house was in an old neighborhood of Lahore, where narrow streets, old buildings, and sounds coming from all sides were part of life. He would wake up in the morning, go to school, play cricket with his friends, and enjoy his mother's bread in the evening. My father used to run a small shop from where the expenses of the house used to run. He was tough, but everything was bearable in his mother's presence. My mother was everything to me. She would get me ready for school in the morning, tell me stories, and when I came home tired, I could rest my head on her lap. She says, "Son, life is a journey. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad, but always have courage." There was a magic in his voice that gave me strength. But fate had something else in store. One day my mother suddenly fell ill. At first we thought it was a common fever, but soon it turned out to be a serious illness. The doctors did a lot of tests but didn't find anything. Dad mortgaged his shop and got treatment, but all in vain. The mother's condition worsened. When I came home from school, I saw my mother lying on the bed, her face pale. I would sit next to her, hold her hand and say, "Ami, you will be fine." She smiled and said, "Yes, son, trust in Allah," but the pain was hidden in his eyes. One night when it began to rain heavily, the mother's breath began to rise. Dad woke me up and said, "Hurry up, let's go to the hospital." We sat in the taxi, but on the way, the mother breathed her last. "Don't leave me," she cried, but she was gone. The day of the funeral was a day of resurrection for me. Neighbors gathered, funeral prayers were offered, and the mother was buried in the cemetery. I was standing on the grave, my hands trembling as I poured mud. The people were saying, "O Son of Allah," but my heart was broken. Back home, it was quiet. Dad was quiet too, but there was a strange hardness in his silence. I used to think that maybe now my father will take me close to him, hug me, because now we were each other's support. But that was my mistake. In the evening, my father came to my room. His eyes were red, but not with anger. He said, "You see, your mother is gone. Who will pay for the house now? The store is already at a loss. You're a burden to me. Grab your stuff and get out. Learn to live." His words shocked me. I asked him, "Dad, where are you going?" "I'm just a child." "You're leaving me too, are you?" My voice was trembling, my eyes were full of tears, but it had no effect on my father. They picked up my wallet, threw me out of the room, and pushed me to close the door. I was crying outside. He knocked on the door and said, "Oh, my father, let me in." But there was no response from inside. The night was deep. It started to rain, but it was cold. I was alone on the street with nothing to eat or sleep. The lights in the neighborhood were going out one by one, and I was wondering what to do now. It was the darkest night of my life. I sat on the road, sobbing in the rain. The teeth were ringing from the cold, but the heartache was even greater. I thought maybe a relative would help, but our relatives were far away, and Abu never had a good relationship with them. Until morning, I was sitting in a park, where some people were jogging. When I was hungry, I felt pain in my stomach. I thought what to do now. Go to school with friends. But he was embarrassed. Finally, I walked to the train station. Lahore's main railway station is always full. Trains would come and go, passengers would walk, and there would be people doing menial jobs. When I reached there, I saw laborers picking up goods, peddlers selling tea and snacks. I sat in the corner looking at the people. Hunger plagued me, so I stood next to a tea seller. He was an old man with a beard and a little kindness in his eyes. He said, "What do you want?" I nodded and said, "Nothing, uncle, I'm just hungry." He laughed and said, "If you don't have money, work. Pick up the cup, wash the dishes. Bread and tea will be provided." I immediately said yes. That was my first job. I washed the dishes, cleaned the cups, and got a loaf of bread and tea in return. And the bread was delicious. I eat the best food in the world. From that day on, I became a regular. He used to do small chores throughout the day, sometimes picking up the luggage of the passengers, sometimes helping the people with the luggage. At night, he slept in a corner on the platform. Sometimes I fall asleep by the sound of the train, sometimes by the cold. One day, a laborer saw me and said, "Son, you seem to be of school age. Why did you run away from home?" I rolled my eyes and said, "Uncle, the family threw me out." He lamented, "The world is cruel, but have courage." He gave me some money and told me to try to sell the newspaper. I started selling books the next day. He would pick up the newspaper early in the morning and sell it at the station. "Latest news," continued to cry. "Some people buy it, some don't." At the end of the day, he would eat whatever money came his way, but they are often hungry. One day, the rain came down. I was lying on the platform, body trembling. A woman saw him and said, "Son, take this medicine." He gave me paracetamol and said, "Take care of yourself." This kindness reminded me that there are good people in the world. Time went by. I started collecting money, saving a little money every day. She remembered her mother's words, "Son, no matter how cruel the world is, never let the light within you dim." This phrase has become a mantra for me. What would I do if I were a mother? Maybe they'll send me to school. So I decided to start teaching again. It took months to pay the school fees. I earned money from labor, sometimes helped the laundrymen, sometimes polished the boots. Finally got in. The day's routine has changed. I go to school in the morning, classes throughout the day, and work in the evening, studying at night. I often fall asleep with a book in my hand. The teachers made me work hard. A teacher, Mr. Ahmed, called me and said, "Your marks are good, but you look tired." "What's the matter?" I've told my story. He said sadly, "Son, you were brave. I'll help you." They started giving me free tuition. The matriculation exam is approaching. I studied day and night, sitting in the library, making notes. On the day of the exam, my heart was pounding, but I passed with good marks. When the result came, the people of the neighborhood clapped. Mr. Ahmed said, "Son, there is a fire inside you. Just keep working hard. One day you will go far." These words were a gift to me. Then I got a scholarship to college, and I started studying business management. College life is different from school. Here people were from rich houses. They had new things, fashionable clothes. I would go in my old clothes, and my friends would laugh. "Hey, this guy always works." But I knew it was different. He worked in a fast food restaurant during the day, taking orders, serving food, cleaning. Classes in the morning and classes in the evening. One day, a professor in the class asked, "What is business?" I replied, "Sir, business is the hallmark of hard work, patience, and opportunity." He laughed and said, "Your answer seems practical. You've seen in your life. This encourages me." But there were also difficulties. Once there was an illness, work was lost, money was reduced. When I couldn't pay the hostel rent, I spent the night in the park. But don't give up. Among the friends was a boy, Ali, who was rich. He looked at me and said, "Why are you working so hard? Party with me." But I refused to do that. One day he heard my story and said, "You are truly an inspiration." He gave me some books. The college years passed. I created a business plan. On graduation day, I was a topper. The principal said, "This boy is an example that hard work can change everything." Now I started looking for a job, but the jobs aren't easy. Several interviews were conducted. One day I had an interview with a company. The manager asked, "What is your background?" I told the true story. He was impressed and got the job. That was my first job. The sales assistant. The pay was low, but it was a start. I got a job and started my own business. The first business was a small shop. The grocery. I took out a loan and rented a shop. At first it was good, but then the competition increased. One day the shop was robbed and everything was gone. I broke down, crying. But I remembered what my mother said, and I started again. The other was an online business. I started selling products. He worked day and night in marketing. Learned from failures. The debt increased in one failure, but I did not give up. The company began to grow. Work. Create an office. Now people call me with respect, take my name in meetings. News of my success began to appear in the newspapers. But he was wounded in the heart. I remember my father's words. I wonder what they would say if they saw it. One day I went to my office. As he got out of the car, he saw an old man begging on the street. I looked at him. He was my dad. Time has ruined them. My secretary said, "Sir, this is asking for help." I thought and said, "Tell him to pack his things and learn to live." At that moment there was peace, but the question in my heart was, what would I say if I were a mother? That's my story. The struggle, the success, and the revenge of an injury.